We have economist Enver ERKAN in the studio with us to talk to us further about the tariffs imposed on China by the United States. And we also have a second guest, Professor of International Economics, Simona Beretta from Università Cattolica del Sacro Cuore. Welcome, Enver. Good to have you in the studio. Simona, welcome to the studio. I can't hear Simona's voice, so can we organise that, please? Now, I'll start with my first question. The tariffs imposed on China by the US have led to pretty much... Simona, I'll ask you to answer us first, if you don't mind. They've led to a crisis. In fact, it's starting to be called a bit of a trade war. What can you tell us about these trade tariffs by the US on China?
Well, the tariff package is just one possibly effort at signaling the necessity to renegotiate the overall trade deals with between China and the US in a perspective in which trade is a part and not the whole of the problem. I think that most of these efforts at, let's say, punishing China overwhelming power of exporting to the US is indeed hiding a deeper purpose, which is setting, let's say, a negotiating step towards discussing deeper issues such as those that intertwine intellectual property, technology advances, and the civil military consequences that these changes that loom ahead can bring us. So it's a trade war, yes, but let's say the elder version of trade war is tariff wars. I think this is a war that can be brought ahead and that can deliver bad consequences to both countries actually and to the world system, but it's just the surface war of a deeper problem between the US and China, which is not based on old-fashioned trade flows, but is based on the forthcoming potential changes in industrial, technological, and intelligence development in both countries.
Okay, thank you for that, Simona. Enver, I'll ask you the same question. Now, Simona said that earlier in her answer that there was somewhat a punishment towards China and that there was a deeper purpose. What would you like to add or contribute?
Unfair trade agreements were part of Trump's election campaign throughout the presidential election process. First, the U.S. exited from Trans-Pacific Partnership, then threatened to withdraw NAFTA and make Canada and Mexico to renegotiate it. Also, it accuses China, other technology exporting Asian nations, as well as Europe, especially Germany, in terms of unfair trade. Remember, he was aimed to describe China as a currency manipulator before, because the U.S. Treasury did not do it, but it was an important issue, because China, sometimes Japan, Korea, Germany, were in Trump's target, because according to Mr. Trump, they were leaving their local currency weak and taking advantage of doing more export. The current issue could be seen to aim to reduce U.S. trade deficit against China, but when we look at the complete package of U.S. tariff list, it is more likely to aim prevent China to transfer technology from U.S. companies, because China aims to be a technology developer and exporter in the next couple of years. The most recent accusing of China includes the intellectual property rights, and U.S. does not want China to become a new big rival, because China has the ability of developing the same technology with lower costs and with lower prices to final consumers compared to U.S. companies, which would make U.S. Technology companies to struggle when selling to their local market or also exporting to the world, I think. And yes, it's a trade war throughout the tariffs.
And how long do you think this will continue?
I don't know, maybe short, maybe in next years. China responded to U.S. tariffs quickly by preparing a more effective package compared to U.S. Tariff package. Totally the amount is the same with U.S. tariff package, but includes 106 goods, not thousands of goods like America's. The balance of international trade would change after that. For example, China would lead to other nations, for example, South American nations, after imposing tariff on U.S. soybeans, for example. And U.S. will do the same with other nations also. And maybe Trump will go after Germany after China issue. So it's the main uncertainty here, seems like that. And everyone will be affected from this. Let's hope that the negotiations between U.S. and China officials goes well after that.
What about the global economy? You did say that this could possibly impact other countries as well. He might move on to Germany from China. Just as a general look at the global economy, how do you think this will come? What will this start or spark, do you think?
Yes, we see some effects on global markets. It's the main issue and hurting the global risk appetite badly. And the U.S. stocks respond badly after Trump's most recent tariff statement. When we look at the feature indexes, Baltic Dry Index, a main indicator, also responded badly after that. Also, the global money managers would be more aware of risky assets after that, I think. That means the bonds of developed countries, maybe gold, maybe Japanese yen, would appreciate some after that. And trade wars were negative for global economic growth also. And the global investors would observe global growth first, especially investing in global stocks. Because of that, let's hope the situation goes well, and disputes would be solved via the bilateral or multilateral agreements.
Simona, I'd like to ask you the same question as well. How do you think these tariffs that have been imposed by the US will affect the global economy? Do you think other countries will be impacted as well? How do you think it will go from here?
Other countries would stay still in face of a very significant conflictual situation between the US and China. So I expect some form of retaliation, and most of all I fear a loss of trust in the global multilateral rule-based trade system, which is an intangible good that the international community has been developing over decades. It's of course not perfect, it's far from being perfect, but it's the only instrument we have as the world community to face contrasts and tough periods between countries or between regions. In this sense, I see that some developments that are often overlooked may be more important than we perceive them now. For example, the 11 countries of the Pacific Rim that signed the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement give a clear signal that trade wars are lose-lose situations, not win-win situations. And even more relevant from my point of view, the fact that 44 countries out of 55 members of the African Union signed this continental free trade area is also an important sign that trade is important. Trade creates connections, and trade is something that is both cooperative and controversial. Of course, trade has controversial dimensions, but very seldom let's say the fact that one country has a surplus or a deficit is significant in terms of how good or how bad is trade for that country. So on the global level, there will be a readjustment. Trade wars have been a classical item also of the peaceful post-war era. I mean, the EU-US trade conflicts have been spanning over decades and touching upon issues from hormone beef to bananas to stupid things like today steel and aluminium are important sectors, but they are, let's say, marginal, highly symbolically significant, but not so crucial economically. And so this part of the trade wars does not bother me too much. I mean, it's there, we have to deal with it. There will be readjustment, new providers of some goods will show up, old providers of goods will diminish their importance in the international trade. There will be collateral damage if we think that a lot of productions are internationally connected through very complex supply chains. So all this is very important, but minor in my perspective with respect to the overall consequences of wrecking an international trade system based on rules which are, as I said, imperfect, but still the only one we have.
Well, I'm going to have to start to wrap it up shortly. If there are any last comments you'd like to make on the tariffs, we'd be happy to hear them, Simona, rather.
Well, tariffs are instruments that seem simple but can be very complicated. How much damage the internal U.S. firms will face because of the steel tariff, we don't know. Because, of course, we have steel producers which are direct beneficiaries of a steel tariff. But we have steel users that will pay steel more than they used to. And this is bad for the U.S. economy itself. And this is also true for soybean or whatever you can think of. In a country you have both producers and users of that product. So tariffs are a double-edged sword that it punishes not only the foreigners but also some groups within the economy. So trade wars, in a sense, cannot be interminable. They will finish at some point because the further they go, the more evident their negative effect on the domestic economy are. So I think that we have to react, let's say, people that are not Chinese and not US, we should react with some calmness and do as little retaliation as it is possible to signal that we would like to live in a world in which we have no tariff wars. That's important. And it's, let's say, more important to give positive contribution to assessing the possibility for all countries to participate to a stable system of rule-based trade.
Thank you, Simona, for your very insightful contribution.
You're welcome, and congratulations for your program.
Thank you very much. Now, Enver, I'll pose the same question to you. You heard Simona's comments. Now, I just want to, well, you can add or contribute to those, but I also want to know what you think about. Do you think that this is a move by the US because they see China as a bit of a threat? They're a very powerful economy and they're gaining momentum day by day. What would you like to say about that?
Yeah, we have talked about it a little bit, and I think, yes, it's a war started by US, and they see China as a big rival, big main rival. And it's not about the amount of trade deficit of US. I think it's more related to intellectual property rights because US does not want Asian competitors to use their technology they develop. And it's not an issue about the World Trade Organization also because WTO's main aim is to make global trade free, not about the imbalances of trade, I think. So China seems to break down the order which created by US after the Second World War, and I think in the main new world order, China is becoming a more efficient actor and is taking steps to become a more efficient actor for the new world order, I think.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much for your contribution also, Enver.
You're welcome.
It's always a pleasure to have you in the studio.
You too.
Now, we'll move on with world news. A German court on Thursday agreed